my name is Bruce Firestone. I have been involved in the PSUM mentoring program for probably 6 or 7 years now, and I am a local Orange County trained scientist. I have a PhD in an area called pharmaceutics, which is basically drug development. And I have an undergraduate degree in chemistry. So I come out of the physical sciences area, but I spent my career in drug development here at Allergan in Orange County, which got acquired and is now AbbVie. And now I'm consulting for the pharmaceutical industry. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm sitting in my guitar room now. So I'm a guitar player as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. So I read in your PSUM profile that you were introduced to synthesis and drug structure in an OChem lab class you took during your time at UCI. And I was just wondering if it was a particular experiment or just like OChem lab as a whole that made you realize you wanted to study drug development more deeply.
Yeah, that's right. You did your homework, Michelle. So actually, it was at UC Berkeley, which is where I did my undergraduate education, and I was a chem major taking organic chemistry. The laboratory that term, we were going to synthesize a antibiotic drug that was discovered in Germany and just after World War One, and it came out of the Bayer laboratories. It's called Prontosil, and it ended up being a very famous drug. It was one of the first antibiotics that was discovered and developed, and it actually led to the saving of a lot of lives and improvement in human health, especially following World War One. And so when the professor was describing the structure of the molecule and how we were going to synthesize it, how we were going to purify it, isolate it, recrystallize it, that's all organic chemistry. But the history connected me with human health, between chemistry and human health. And that was an aha moment. The light bulb went on for me at that moment. I thought, wow, I could get into drug development and use my knowledge of chemistry towards human health. So that was my aha moment. And I try to help undergrads in the PSUM program find their passion in their trajectory for what they do at UCI and beyond.
Oh, okay. So you're helping like your mentees find their aha moment too, huh?
Correct. That's right. Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I find it really interesting. That was that intersection of like chemistry and then its application to human health that like drew you to drug development. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
All right. So I guess on that note, how do most people tend to get into the field of pharmaceutical chemistry, and what are some common entry-level jobs in this field?
Well, so probably the conversation begins with drug discovery and development involves a lot of different backgrounds. I obviously came to it from chemistry, but there are many, many scientists and clinicians, MDs, marketing people, lawyers that do intellectual property and patents. So you can get into drug development from a variety of different backgrounds. Probably the most important is that you're passionate about developing drugs and contributing to the development from your area of interest and expertise. But it's a massive industry, from the cost of developing drugs, because it's fraught with failure. Many compounds don't work and don't make it through the development pathway leading to FDA approval, which is always, well, let me just say, is generally required, but not always. And FDAs around the world, most first world countries have their own version of the FDA in their country. and to market it in individual countries, you have to go through that submission and approval process. So, but it's an expensive area, but it leads to the improvement of human health, as we've said. And there's many recent examples about what drug development can do for human health. And we could talk about that, but just to answer your question briefly.
Okay. Yeah, like I think it's interesting that you bring up all the different pathways in the pharmaceutical industry and how a lot of drugs kind of like fail during the development stage before they make it to FDA approval. Because oftentimes, like when we see like medicine in the store or just like medicine we use, we don't really think about everything it takes just to like get that medicine. So yeah.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And Congress has done, the US Congress has incentivized cheaper forms of drugs by defining generic drugs, if you've heard the term generic drugs. So the innovator, the first company that develops a brand new drug, has a certain patent lifetime in which they have a monopoly of that drug in the marketplace, and other companies cannot copy it and enter the marketplace for that 20-year period. But once that 20-year period expires and the patent is expiring, then the generic companies can introduce their own copies, if you will, and that brings the price down, and that's good for consumers because the brand name comes with a pretty large development budget that the company wants to recoup, because without it they wouldn't be funding R&D costs. But then that's only for a limited lifetime, and eventually the generics, if they can show equivalency, can get into the marketplace as well as cheaper versions of the same drug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that just really reminds me of all like the different variations of like the same drug I've seen on like stores and stuff. But yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's really interesting to know. All right, so I guess kind of shifting into a little different topic, more about the skills you've learned like from your undergraduate experience and applying it to your job today. But I know in undergraduate, like teaching lab, like the labs we take in undergrad are much different than like a research lab or like working in the industry. So what skills were you able to transfer from your undergrad like lab experiences to your current job?
Yeah, it's a good question. When you come through a um, program like at Berkeley or like at UCI or like at many top flight universities, you're going to be trained in the technical area, in the theoretical area from which you come. In my case, it was chemistry, which led to pharmaceutics. And you're generally very employable with a degree from a known university. I decided to get a PhD. I worked after I graduated with a bachelor's degree. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and saw what went on. When you're working at the bachelor's level, you're mainly in drug development, you're mainly in the laboratory with a white coat on and safety glasses, doing, running instruments and running experiments, generating data. And that has a steep learning curve, which is great. But I eventually decided that I wanted to go back to school to get my PhD so that I could enter pharmaceutical development at a different level where I'm responsible for the people in the lab and communicating the results to senior management to help the project move along. So I just personally decided that a PhD was consistent with my career path, but that's not necessarily required. It just depends on what the individual is looking to do in their career. But an advanced degree helps you, gain access to, say, management at, depending on the industry and the company and so on. And that was of interest to me. What I would say as the sort of the other half of your question, Michelle, is that an area that undergraduate education um, doesn't do so well at, and I think this is why the mentoring program is so helpful in general to undergrads, is that there are soft skills that are needed in depending on which way you go in your career. If you go into academia and you go into teaching and basic research at the university, or you go into industry, soft skills are always very important. You certainly have to have the education that we've just talked about. And you come from a place like UCI, the education is world class, no question about it. But it's the soft skills that really can make a difference when you want an internship or you want to interview for that first job after you graduate, or whatever the next step for you is. It generally will involve soft skills. Can you shake a hand and look into someone's eye and greet them? Can you collaborate with peers on a team? Can you write well? Can you speak well? Can you face a challenging problem that you may not know how to solve, but you have the resourcefulness to decide how you're going to tackle a problem? Like, will you collaborate with others? Will you do some research, in a library or online? How will you advance the project from your own resourcefulness point of view? And I think soft skills are very important. And so when I mentor an undergrad, once we find out what their interests are, what their career track is looking like, what they want to do on the next step, we always talk about soft skills, because I want them to be very comfortable with all that goes into working with others and being successful at that. Even down to, how do you interview? How do you write a CV that can catch an attention of a hiring manager, for example? So all of those things are sort of separate and beyond the technical education that you're getting at a place like UCI, which itself is very excellent and very needed, but it's the soft skills on top of that. I usually tell my mentees, you're going to find that the soft skills are very, very important and will help differentiate you versus somebody else that is, say, applying for the same job, the same internship, and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, like we always think about like all the classes we're taking at school and then like the jobs we hope to get like after school, but like it's really the soft skills that really bridge those two together.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And you might find in an interview, someone might say, Michelle, so I'm going to hand you a problem. And let's say you don't know immediately how to solve it. What would you do? What would your approach be? And so, you may not have had that experience as an undergraduate. Yes, the information that you're learning in the class can be challenging, but it's very structured. It's a structured environment when you're in school and taking a class. You've got a textbook, you've got a professor, you've got a TA, you've got a midterm next week, you've got a final exam down the road, you're doing your homework. It's a very structured environment. And what I like to emphasize to my mentees is, when you get out in the real world, there's a lot less structure. And that's where you have to sort of bring it through soft skills and knowing how to keep the ball moving forward so that it advances the project. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is an adjustment, like being from that structure that comes with school to like adjusting to like a job or an internship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess one last question I'm a bit curious about is what do you wish you had known before you started work in the pharmaceutical industry?
Well, I think it would again come back to soft skills because I came out of a pretty challenging technical environment at UC Berkeley. It was a very difficult major. It had world-class professors. The information was difficult and to spend a lot of time at it. But it didn't so much emphasize soft skills. And so that's what I've come to learn and really appreciate that those that really do well not only have the background for the job, but they have the soft skills. And so I'm not faulting any undergraduate program whatsoever for not focusing on that. But I think that the PSUM program as an overlay over the physical sciences majors at UCI is an outstanding way to be introduced to the concept of soft skills, what they are, how can you develop them and get proficient at them in time for the next step for you um, at the next summertime break or after graduation. So, I think that the mentorship program would be an excellent addition to almost any program. And I'm really glad that UCI and the Physical Sciences College there it has emphasized this and has it available for those that want to volunteer for it.
Yeah, PSUM is definitely a great resource. And I also
Yeah,
participated in last year too, and I've definitely learned a lot more. And really
yeah,
expanded skills developed at UCI. So
yeah. Great.
yeah, all right. Thank you so much for letting me interview you today, Bruce. I really appreciate it.